and then these crosshatches got patterns that you can select. So essentially everything is point and click, and this in summary is what you're going to learn. Now we're going to go step by step through the process. So once again, you can manipulate geometry, the constraints, the dimension, the input cells and output cell, and output cell can then work as an input cell also. There's a text block that you can do. You can edit the text, this format, unit, style, and view manipulation. This is what we're going to learn here. So having said this, let me select everything and delete everything. So we have a blank sheet. Now we're going to see in details each of these facilities. So to perform a single operation on a tool, you just click on the tool and then you bring your cursor in and you can create the geometry. For example, this is creating the 2-point circle. Here I can create a closed polygon. Just at the last point, click the right mouse button and it'll close the polygon. So for single operation, just click on the tool and follow the prompts. And if you wanted to do multiple operations using the same tool, for example, you want to draw a number of lines, you double click on the tool, then the tool turns black to indicate that it is being selected for multiple operations. The tool will not close as you're drawing, and when you're finished your last entity, either you can press the escape key on your keyboard or the pick tool here, or just click the right mouse button and it'll close the tool. Now, important thing to learn in CAD Calcs that an entity, any entity, has got 3 possible states. When you create an entity, it's left with 4 black boxes around here. This indicates that the entity is selected. So entity is left in the selected state just after creation. You can also select an entity by moving the cursor over it and clicking the right mouse button. When the entity is selected, you can change its style, you can delete it, or you can put it into a selection. So let me delete this entity, and you saw how the entity got deleted. And if you want to select multiple entities, you can just simply put a window around what you want to select. That's one way. The other way would be to press the shift key, and then you can click on the entities that you want in your selection, and only the entities that you click on come into the selection, and then move the cursor away from the geometry, click the right mouse button and delete. It'll delete the entity. There is multiple level undo. You can set the undo steps to any numbers that you want. Up to 1000 is okay, and whatever you undo you can redo. There is another very interesting feature we have put in. For example, here 3 types of entities, but I want to select all lines. So if you, the default is select all under edit, but if you want to select all entities of one type, you just click on the tool here and this will change to select all lines. Now only the lines have been selected. Likewise, if I just clicked on the circle, it'll be select all circle and only the circles will be selected. So you can selectively change entity types and then manipulate them. As you notice, there is a cursor here. It says a cross here, and there are 2 cursors in CAD Calc. So once again, coming back to the entity states, the entity is closed. This is got no bounding boxes. Then when you click on the entity, it is set to be in the open state. It reveals its constraints. So you, and then when you move the cursor over any of these points, you can select it and drag it, and at the end of the operation it's returned back to the selected state. Open the entity, the cursor changes to a square, click and operate. So an entity has to be selected to delete it or change its style. It has to be open to allocate geometrical constraints, and in the normal situation it stays closed. You saw the right mouse button coming on and off, so let me just show you what you can do with the right mouse button. It's very useful to understand this. If an entity is selected, clicking on the delete button deletes the entity. And if you have an entity selected, I'm going to select it by clicking the right mouse button. You can allocate a tag, custom name, because each geometry, text, or dimension or cell entity is given an internal tag which is computer generated, but you can give it any tag that you wish, so that later on when that entity is referred into in a calculation, it'll be referred to by its tag. We will go into that when we show you some of the calculation facilities on how this feature becomes useful. So the infer constraint is a switch. When this is on, the snaps work, the constraint snaps works. For example, I can go to the midpoint here, I can go to the center of this, to the midpoint of this. So all of these constraint snapping are inferred automatically. The line, if you draw, they'll snap automatically to horizontal and vertical. To do this, the infer constraint has to be on. If the infer constraint is off, then the automatic constraint snaps are disabled. In the sketch mode, CAD/CAL starts working like an old-fashioned CAD package without any. What it does, it allows you to constrain the geometry, but the constraint is no longer retained. Let me just remove these. So for example, if I drew a line from the endpoint here and I draw a line from midpoint to midpoint, you saw the constraints were snapping because of the infer constraint, but if I open the entity, it shows it as free point. And if I did the same thing with the sketch mode off, that is a normal operating mode, so I will draw the same thing and go from midpoint to midpoint. If I open this, it tells me that these 2 points are constrained. Anytime there's a constraint attached to a point, you get these 3 lines here showing that it's been constrained. And the precision can be control of an individual dimension or an entity or a cell. For example, let's measure this here. So I can just click the right mouse button on this and say that I want to see it in 7 decimal precision. So individual precision of a cell, let's say you put in a cell here, 2 millimeters, and I don't want to see any decimals, so you can change. So delete deletes a selected entity, properties allocates a custom tag name to the entity, infer constraints allows constraint snaps to work as they're detected. Sketch mode constrains the geometry but removes the constraints, and set decimals changes the decimal precision of a selected dimension or a cell. So now let's get another interesting part. So geometry, when it's created,